This video is sponsored by Brilliant. So does anyone remember when people used to like Elon Musk? This guy was a genius. He was gonna save the world with his big brain. People used to call him the real-life Tony Stark.
People have called you the real Tony Stark.
But then everyone realized that his genius persona was all fake. He ruined his reputation by saying stupid stuff on Twitter, then proceeded to ruin the entire platform after buying it. He said he wouldn't get involved with politics, and so of course he got involved with politics. And then he did this thing. He also got caught cheating in competitive video games, which isn't surprising because there's no way he has the time. I mean, this guy is super busy. Busy posting on Twitter all day. So as a result of all of this, Tesla stock plummeted by 50%. Sales are dropping all over the world, and even loyal Tesla supporters are distancing themselves from Elon despite loving their car. This is especially bad in Canada, where 71% of Canadians support banning Tesla sales altogether. Now, all of this got me thinking about the state of EVs, or electric vehicles, because yeah, cars are bad for the environment, so we need electric cars ASAP to help fight climate change. The problem is that the current EV adoption rate is, way too fucking slow. Even if EVs make up 60% of new car sales in the US by 2050, as they are projected to do so, most cars on the road will still be gasoline or hybrid, and that's because cars these days have a lifespan of 10 to 20 years. If we want every car on the road to become fully electric by 2050, the sale of new gasoline vehicles would have to end completely by 2035. So while EVs will slowly take over throughout the next 4 decades, that's already 4 decades too late. A big reason for this is that Western EVs are expensive and they kinda suck. People are rightfully concerned about the battery, the cost, the range, and the availability of charging stations. Meanwhile, China has been pouring billions and billions of dollars into EV development, which is why Chinese EVs from brands like BYD are now taking over the market, because they're way cheaper and they don't suck. But wait a minute, if Chinese EVs are so much cheaper and better, why don't we all just drive them? Oh yeah, it's because pretty much every Western country has imposed tariffs on Chinese EVs. Great. So it really seemed like Tesla was our saving grace. They're the biggest car company in the world and they only sell electric vehicles. So considering the already slow adoption of EVs in North America, all the recent controversy around Elon Musk and Tesla has pretty much been the final nail in the coffin. So what do we do now? Well, let me ask you this. Do we even need electric cars? Do we just have to sit around and wait while the world around us burns to the ground? Or do the solutions to climate change and transportation already exist? Well, the answer is yes, we do need electric cars. Even when you consider the manufacturing of the vehicle, producing the battery, operating the vehicle, and disposing the vehicle at the end of its life, electric cars still produce less carbon dioxide throughout their entire lifespan than gasoline vehicles. These benefits will improve even further as we switch to renewable sources of energy like wind and solar. But even in places where electricity is still mainly generated using coal, electric cars are still greener. The issue with electric cars is that they're still cars. Tailpipe emissions are just one of the many different ways that cars harm the environment. So when cars in general are the problem, simply switching to a different type of car that's powered differently doesn't change any of those other issues. EVs might be more fuel efficient and use less energy, but what we've seen in the past is that those efficiency gains are then spent on making bigger, less efficient vehicles. Take for example the rise of pickup trucks and SUVs in North America. These newer vehicles are definitely more fuel efficient than ever before, but they're also bigger and more powerful than ever before. And no matter how much we improve technology, a giant gas-guzzling pickup truck is always going to use more energy than, a normal-sized car. High and Mighty by Keith Bradsher is a great book that talks about how these vehicles became so popular and why that's catastrophic for safety and the environment. But wait a minute, aren't these vehicles supposed to be safer? I mean, that's what the car commercial I saw the other day said. Well, it is true that these bigger SUVs and trucks are safer, only for the person inside the vehicle, not for anyone else. This leads to an arms race battle where people don't feel safe driving next to these giant cars, leading to even more people buying a giant car themselves. So it's basically all just a dick measuring contest. Look at all these peasants in their tiny cars. And better move out of the way, cause they're messing with the wrong guy. You think your car's big? Look at my car. It's way bigger. Yeah, nice try, bucko. But I got the biggest car on the road. In fact, I need a ladder just to get inside. Guys, please don't hurt me. I'm just trying to get my crumble cookies. It should be common knowledge at this point that most, not all, but most people driving these giant vehicles are not actually towing or hauling anything that heavy, other than their own fat ass. And this isn't just about personal preferences either, because these things are literally killing people. Look at how many children can sit in front of this thing before they become visible to the driver over this massive hood.
That is so scary. I can't see any of them.
Probably the most interesting part of this book to me is Chapter 6, Reptile Dreams. I promise this is a book about cars. It basically talks about the psychology behind why certain people even buy these giant vehicles, and long story short, it's because they're boomers. I don't want to overgeneralize, but that was literally based on the auto industry's own market research. They found that the type of people who buy pickup trucks and SUVs tend to be middle-aged Americans who are insecure, self-centered, less confident with their driving skills, and lack interest in their neighbors and their community. So basically the target demographic of these things are assholes. Hey, you might work a lame 9-to-5 office job, but just buy this car and everyone will think you're cool and adventurous. Just don't break your fingers off as you're closing the door.
That's kind of bad.
A big problem here is that a lot of this obsession is deeply ingrained into American culture. Anthropological research has shown that Americans tend to be overly scared of crime, even if that fear is completely irrational. Because of the constant violence that is shown on the media and the internet, Americans have become obsessed with their own physical safety. So while Europeans and Asians might think of safety as a small and light car that's cutie patootie, Americans tend to think of safety as put a giant tank around me so I can annihilate anyone who gets in my way. Now, what does all of this have to do with electric vehicles? Well, you might know that EV batteries are really freaking heavy, which means that when we switch to electric, these big and heavy cars are gonna get even bigger and heavier. The electric Hummer, for example, weighs over 9,000 pounds, and just the battery alone weighs more than a Toyota Corolla. The Ford F-150 Lightning is over 1,000 pounds heavier than the regular Ford F-150, which is already an absurdly big and heavy car. As vehicles get heavier, they deal exponentially more wear and tear on the road, so if you love big cars, I'm sure you'll also love big holes. That's potholes. What, were you thinking of something else? Many people think that electric cars will reduce noise pollution, and yeah, they will. Only when they're going below 30 kilometers per hour. When you go beyond that speed, the sound of the tires rolling on the ground becomes much more noticeable than the engine, and that gets amplified with heavier vehicles. Then there's all the metals and microplastics that shed off of tires, brakes, and road markings. Not only do we breathe these particles in, but a lot of them gets washed into rivers, lakes, and oceans when it rains, killing wildlife. Studies going back to the 1960s have found that these particles have ended up in the Arctic. And since these particles are dark, they absorb more sunlight, which causes Arctic ice to melt faster. But the biggest problem with electric cars is not even the car itself. It's the way cities are built around cars and the high carbon lifestyles that these places create. Cars simply take up a ton of space and are very inefficient in large numbers. Which is why we're making them even bigger, of course. So in order to accommodate cars, cities need to spread everything super far apart with wide roads and giant parking lots. This sprawling land use is one of the biggest reasons why American cities are so unwalkable, which I talked about in my previous video. Basically, building places around cars makes it nearly impossible to not drive a car. It doesn't matter if you're commuting across the city or grabbing a coffee from Starbucks, you have no choice but to drive. If you are crazy enough to walk or take the non-existent public transit, People assume you're either homeless, a criminal, or a lost European tourist. Although it's probably going to be the first two. So switching to electric cars doesn't change the fact that hundreds of acres of farmland are paved over each day for suburban development. It doesn't change the miles upon miles of asphalt surfaces dedicated to roads and parking lots, which makes our cities hotter and more likely to flood. It doesn't change the fact that suburban buildings are super inefficient, requiring much more energy to heat and cool. I can go on, but the point is, electric cars are sold to make people feel like they're part of the green revolution, without actually changing their unsustainable lifestyles. Again, we do need electric cars, but they can't be the only solution. Yet whenever the topic of climate change and transportation come up, they always get the full spotlight. Because when cars have been the default form of transportation for the entire lives of most people, it's hard to imagine solutions that don't involve cars. Ultimately, an electric car is still going to produce tons of carbon emissions to manufacture, even if it's slightly better than a gasoline car. The batteries require lots of rare earth minerals like lithium and cobalt, which are kind of like the real-life equivalents of diamonds and netherite. This leads to exploitative mining practices, as developing countries have to pay the environmental cost for us. And because of how rare these resources are, it wouldn't be crazy to say that countries will literally go to war over them, which is looking more and more likely. Because you know what's even worse for the environment? A fucking nuclear bomb. What we should be moving towards are smaller electric cars that are cheaper, have better batteries, and most importantly, use less resources to produce. But it seems like we're moving in the exact opposite direction. What fundamentally needs to change is all the loopholes and incentives we give car companies to produce giant vehicles. The book High and Mighty explains this in more detail. When the United States imposed safety, environmental, and tax rules on automobiles in the 1970s, much tougher standards were set for cars than for pickup trucks, vans, and the off-road vehicles that have since evolved into SUVs. The result has been a public policy disaster, with automakers given an enormous and unintended incentive to shift production away from cars and toward less safe, less efficient, and more polluting SUVs. So if we can close these loopholes and place tighter regulations on vehicle production, we can help undo this toxic mindset that you need a giant vehicle to protect yourself on the roads. But the better thing we can do is to stop relying on cars so much in the first place. You know what's so much safer, cheaper, greener, and in some cases more practical than electric cars? That's right, electric bicycles. I mean, sure, you can't move your sofa or refrigerator on a bicycle, which is totally something people need to do all the time. But you know what you can do? Buy groceries, carry your children, commute to work. You know, the things normal people do every day. But seriously, a lot of people can probably do most of their daily tasks using an electric bike or an electric cargo bike. That doesn't mean you never need a car ever, but it just means that a car may not always be as necessary as we might think. In fact, the best-selling electric vehicles in the world right now aren't electric cars. They're actually electric bicycles. That's right, Americans bought over 600,000 e-bikes in 2020, which is more than double the amount of electric cars. And that's America we're talking about, where cars are basically worshipped. E-bike sales in Europe and Asia are even higher. And look, as far as I know, there is no bicycle company whose market value is almost entirely based on speculation and hype around a single billionaire who can't even spell the word apartment correctly. Well, at least for now. So let me get this straight. E-bikes are so much better for the environment. They make you healthier and more active. They are cheaper. They don't cause or get stuck in traffic. They are safe and practical. And unlike the electric car market, e-bikes are flying off the shelves. Now, what are the downsides? Me will get wet when it rains. In addition to cycling, we should also be investing in public transit. Trains and buses are so much more efficient at moving a shit ton of people. Even if transit is not fully electric, which ideally it should be, a person taking the bus is already doing so much more for the environment than a person driving the world's most efficient electric car. Now, I know there's gonna be that one guy who's like, I don't want to sit in a crowded bus next to a bunch of random strangers. Like, dude, stay home. Don't fucking go outside if you hate people. But probably the biggest benefit with getting more people to cycle or take transit is the opportunity to design better cities. Cities built around transit and cycling are naturally more dense and walkable, which means you're not just lowering your transportation emissions, but also your entire lifestyle has a lower carbon footprint overall. And that's the point here, right? It's not just about greener vehicles, but also greener cities. Now, I think most people do care about the environment, but they probably also live in a place like this, where it's basically impossible not to drive. I mean, I don't blame you. If you live here, you'd be crazy not to drive. I would drive. As much as we would love it, these people aren't just gonna ditch their cars and start riding bicycles. Hello? Hi, this is the government. We're just going around today asking people if they wanna get rid of their car. What? No, why would anyone do that? Well, you see, it's because cars are, bad for the environment. Bad for the environment.
The National Weather Service warning conditions to be as bad as it gets.
Today is officially the hottest day ever recorded.
Please, take my keys. Yeah, that's never gonna happen. If we want people to drive less and take transit or cycle more, we have to make those options better. That means building more protected bike lanes and providing more bicycle parking so that cycling is not only safe, but also convenient. We also need more frequent transit service and housing built around transit stations. Ultimately, most people aren't devoted to a certain mode of transportation. Well, unlike me, I will take public transit no matter what. But most people just choose whatever's fastest and most convenient. When you make it easy, safe, and convenient to ride a bike, people will ride bikes. When you make it easy and convenient to take transit, people will take transit. And when you make it easy and convenient to drive a car while neglecting everything else, people will drive cars. Shocking, I know. So when cars are the problem, focusing on electric cars as our solution to climate change doesn't really change anything if you think about it. We need to make other options better so that we don't need to rely on cars in the first place. You know what else we really need? Knowledge. Learning new things every day is the best way to keep your brain sharp after watching all that brain rot on TikTok. So just like cycling or taking transit, learning needs to be as fun and easy as possible so that you're actually motivated to do it. That's where Brilliant comes in, the sponsor of today's video. Brilliant is a platform with thousands of interactive lessons on math, science, programming, data analysis, and AI. Each lesson only takes a few minutes and you can just do it while commuting on a train or during your break. And before you know it, you'll gain so much knowledge and skills that you otherwise wouldn't have. I am not a STEM person, but I'm still pretty fascinated by generative AI. Cause look, once AI becomes sentient enough to take over the world, it would really help to understand how it works. To beat your enemy, you must know your enemy. Thankfully, Brilliant has a fantastic course on AI that guides you step by step through all the basics of language models and neural networks. Each lesson is full of interactive problem solving, which is not only a more effective way to learn, but also a more fun and engaging way to learn. Of course, if AI doesn't interest you, Brilliant offers so many other courses on topics like algebra, scientific thinking, coding with Python, and data visualizations. To try everything Brilliant has for free for 30 days, go to brilliant.org/flurfdesign, or just click the link in the description or scan the big QR code on screen. You'll also get 20% off an annual premium subscription. Thank you to Brilliant for sponsoring today's video. Anyways, hope you guys enjoyed today's video. I know my upload schedule has been terrible lately, and that's because I'm graduating from college. I'm finally free. Be sure to subscribe, hit the like button, and leave a nice comment. If you leave a mean comment, I will be very sad.